And welcome back into the first episode of this season's Fantasy Football Hot Seat presented by Blitzalytics.com. I know it's been a while, but as per usual, I'm your host, RobRob, here with the man, the myth, the legend, Cody Manning. How you doing this morning, Cody?
I'm doing pretty good. A little nervous because I got to shake off the rust of recording a podcast. It's been a little bit since our probably top 5 video series back a couple months ago for the draft, but excited to be back with you doing our thing, the Fantasy Football Hot Seat. I know we hit last year and ready to kind of do this, I guess now it's a yearly series where we cover these teams like we do.
Yeah, right. We're going to run you through each division here, team by team, cover the fantasy relevant players. Again, moving into the 2020 season, if you guys were with us in 2019, man, I hit, and it felt like I hit a lot and Cody hit more than me, so you definitely should be paying attention to the show. I mean, last year our numbers were pretty good, right, man?
Yeah. We were pretty spot on, and we weren't afraid to boast about it, but the great thing about us, especially if you're a first-time listener, is we will own up to our mistakes if we were wrong on a player.
Right. This is a no backstroke pod. This is how we do it. You know, you miss, you say you miss, but we hit more than we miss. So we're going to go ahead and help you out going into the fantasy draft season. We'll be starting with the NFC South for this division recap. We'll go through each division, like I said, all fantasy relevant players, see if I can remember the tight end position this season. We'll start with Carolina Panthers. It feels like they're the ones with the least amount of guns here, but probably have the biggest gun in the division, so we'll start there. Obviously, last season we were on the McCaffrey #1 bandwagon. If you did that, it worked out well for you, and it sounds like we're kind of both on that again this year, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's got all the talent in the world. They're going to feed him the ball still. It's a new coaching staff, but they got Joe Brady. If anybody doesn't know who that is, that was the offensive coordinator from LSU, I think he was either the offensive coordinator or some type of coordinator from LSU. I can't remember exactly. Regardless, we saw what Clyde Edwards-Helaire did with LSU. He got plenty of balls out of the backfield. That's one of the things Christian McCaffrey does great. I mean, barring some random preseason injury, there's no way he should not go #1. I know it's kind of like a thing you don't want to draft last year's, best team, but it's kind of hard to make a case for drafting anybody else other than Christian at #1.
I spoke with Alex and Jack about it. It's almost like Christian's on a tier by himself, and then I've got Saquon on a tier by himself, and then 2 or 3 other guys in the next tier. It's like that's how far ahead he is to me. So we'll touch on the backup running backs here. You've got and we are on using the Our Lads depth charts just so that you know. The next guy on the depth chart, you've got Reggie Bonifon, Jordan Scarlett, Mike Davis, all names that really don't strike any fear into the taking touches away from McCaffrey. Can any of those guys even be complimentary back, somebody you could use, or somebody should something happen to McCaffrey that you pinpoint as the guy?
I mean, Mike Davis, he does have past starting experience. He's kind of traveled around the NFL. Most of his good starts or good play came with Seattle. So, I mean, if something happened to CMC, I would put my money on him. Jordan Scarlett might be a little sneaky guy, but I mean, it's like I don't think any of those guys are worth a handcuff selection. It's kind of like if you pick CMC, you better pray nothing happens to him.
Right, there might be 60 touches between the other running backs. Totally.
Yeah. It's like if something would happen, looking at this, if something would happen with CMC, I think it would be like a running back by committee type of situation that they would roll with.
Right, just wash your hands of the situation entirely. But again, we don't forecast injury, and Christian is very, very durable. So again, for me, the clear-cut #1, no questions asked. Again, now we're getting into the weaker things here. Again, it's nice to have Teddy Bridgewater in tow for me moving into the quarterback position. but he's not a guy I'm super high on fantasy. He's the guy that if I wait, he's kind of one of those guys I hope is there super late in my fantasy draft. But where do you stand on Teddy? Because I know it's kind of torn right down the center. A lot of people believe in him, and some people are, a little more lukewarm on him.
I definitely believe in him as a quarterback from a football standpoint. He can lead a team to victories. We saw that with New Orleans last year, but same thing we saw with New Orleans last year. That didn't translate too much over to fantasy football, and he was loaded with guys like, Michael Thomas, Jared Cook, Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray in that Saints offense, and he still really didn't put up much points. So behind what I would say a suspect offensive line, I do have my worries if he'll be able to produce. He does have a nice trio of wide receivers we'll talk about here shortly, and potentially an up-and-coming tight end this next year. But, other than that, I don't see myself really trying to get any Teddy shares this year. It'd be like a desperate situation, maybe a bye week play for him.
Yeah, a stream, or I don't have the schedule up in front of me, but if you're streaming quarterbacks and the matchup is nice week 1, then you take him in round 16 or 17 and try to roll with him that way. That's how I feel about Teddy too, so not putting too much stock in him. Moving on over to what you said, though, they do have a trio of receivers that I'm itching to talk about here. Not quite sure that any of them are stud level, but DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel, all in tow here. Obviously, we talked about Samuel last year at length, Robbie being the new man in town, and DJ showing some growth last season. Who's your favorite of the three? If you had to say, this is the guy throwing all the money in here.
Well, I guess we can go ahead and tease it, since David Connors teased it in his article that's on Blitzlytics yesterday that came out. Everybody knows I like my third year wide receivers. Not positive or not if he'll end up being in my top 5, because this addition of Robbie Anderson does scare me a little bit. But DJ Moore, he was, I want to say, he finished in the top 5 receiving yards last year. I know at one point when we were doing this last year, he was like, I think I said something to you. I was like, yeah, he's got like the most yards right now. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I think he's going to take,
to say the least.
Yeah. I think he's going to take that. Yeah, it looks like he finished 9th last year in receiving yards. So
which means he had to have a stretch in the top 5. Like again, and you drafted he was a mid round to late round guy last year, so you definitely got the return on him.
Yeah, so he's the guy, if I had a bet on anybody, I would. Now, obviously, we don't exactly know how the Joe Brady, Matt Rule offense will work out for Carolina, so I'm not sure exactly how his role will be, if they're going to use him similar to how they did last year. I was more of a big fan with him being a third-year wide receiver prior to the addition with Robbie Anderson. When they added Robbie Anderson, and then they still have Curtis Samuel, I know it was floated out there that maybe Curtis Samuel could be traded. That would have maybe been more enticing for me on Moore, but I could see a scenario where like the three of them are like alternating weeks where they're going off. So this is not really a set of wide receivers that I really want a part of, but if I was going to bet on somebody, it would be DJ Moore.
Yeah, same with me. I want DJ of the three. I'm a little concerned about Teddy and Robbie works on a level if they get the short pass and it breaks out, right? I don't see Teddy really chuck it football down the field to Robbie. So I think DJ Moore is the clear one here. I don't mind Samuel. He feels like he's going to be a target monster out of the slot for them. So I'd even go Samuel number 2 for me, because you'll get him much later than you will Robbie Anderson. So I guess, in all honesty, what I'm saying is I'm avoiding Robbie Anderson because the draft price is just going to be too high for my liking. DJ Moore may be too high by the time drafts come around, but if I was going to spend capital, he'd be the way I go. I like you said, the third-year breakout thing is real. You can trace that back a couple seasons. Cody's been writing about that. So DJ Moore, for me, the man to own of the three. Let's move on down. Before I forget it, we'll do tight end, because I always seem to forget this position here. What is it? Ian Thomas is the only real guy on the roster right at this point, right?
Yeah, it looks like they're going to give him a shot. I thought maybe they might bring in another tight end just because that's what teams do. But Ian Thomas is a guy I've always kind of liked. He's kind of flashed. He's had his moments over the past few years. I want to say when Greg Olson, when he went down last year, like that following game, Ian Thomas had like 10 or 11 catches. Like, again, I'm not positive how they're going to use the tight ends in the offense. I know back in the college days with Joe Brady, they used Thaddeus Moss pretty well. Maybe he has a similar role like that. He's a tight end that I think could potentially be a sleeper this year. I mean, he's going to be a guy that he's not a household name. Right. He's not going to go high in the drafts. He's a guy that you can potentially get late. He's a guy that you can potentially get in the season, if we're being completely honest. He might not get drafted in most leagues. So he's just a guy to watch for. And, similar to, the wide receivers, I'm not that biggest believer in the tight end thing, but it's just like tight ends to me are kind of like the wide receiver thing, where it does take tight ends usually a time to develop before they make that impact in the league. And he's in his third year. So there's that third year potential breakout for him as well. So he's just a guy I'm going to keep my eye on. Kind of like the whole Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel, and DJ Moore situation. The one thing that sucks is with this whole pandemic thing, with us not knowing exactly if training camps are going to start on time. We're not going to be able to hear that information. Who's getting featured in camp, and hopefully we can get maybe a preseason that we can see and get an idea how they're going to use him. But he's definitely a guy that's on my radar.
Yeah, again, a guy I'd roll the dice on super late, or even like you said, maybe I decide not to even take a tight end during the draft, and I just load up at running back, for instance, and see what pans out in whatever preseason we may have. Float back and see if Ian Thomas is available after I've decided. So I'm not mad at that at all. Now, again, you brought up the pandemic, which does make me want to kind of slide something new in here. Again, I don't want to forecast for injuries, but should something happen to Bridgewater, who's the backup? Is it Greer or Walker to you? And at that point, again, XFL legend PJ Walker, by the way. And does that cripple the stock of anybody not named CMC if Teddy's not the man back there?
It potentially would. It just depends on who gets. I don't know. I think if PJ Walker plays like he did in the XFL, right? I think he would be the guy that would slide in there over Greer. I never was a Will Greer fan. Greer didn't really show anything last year when he played as a rookie. So, but you never know. He could take that next step. But the thing with both those players is they have both an arm, and they're both not afraid to chuck it down the field. So I will say this: if something were to happen to Teddy and one of those guys would go in, maybe a guy like Robbie Anderson does benefit from it.
Yeah, I could see that. Especially to me, it's if PJ Walker's in there, I'm still going to roll strong with him. He just doesn't care. He cares, but he has no fear. So I'm with you. PJ can chuck it if need be. And again, I know that you're a streaming defense guy. You play the schedule here, so we'll make a quick one of this. But multiple names that were on Blitzalytics list show up on this defense after the draft, with Derek Brown, Jeremy Chin, and Yetur Gross-Matos being the big ones that stick out to me here. But overall, what do you feel as a defense for this? Do you feel comfortable streaming this in mid-tier matchups? Obviously, when you play the crap teams, it's kind of whatever. But
yeah, this defense is young, but just looking it over, it's got a chance to be it could be sneaky good as the season develops. It definitely depends on the play of Derek Brown, but if he plays well and you got Brian Burns and Yetur Gross-Matos, and I like Stephen Weatherly, the guy they signed from Minnesota, that defensive line has some sack potential. Now, obviously, my biggest worry is their secondary. Jeremy Chin, love the player. We'll see if he can adapt to the NFL right away. They also got the XFL legend too, Kenny Robinson.
Boom, boom.
Right behind Trey Boston. Troy Pride was impressive at the Senior Bowl too. I actually like the future of this defense. I just don't know if they're going to produce right away. You know what I like to do. Just so if anybody's a new listener of ours, whenever I draft defenses, I always just specifically look at the Week 1 matchup. They got the Raiders. And let me pull that back up. Raiders in Carolina. So that might be something I watch just because you guys. We'll talk about it later on the AFC West episode, but you know my feelings on Derek Carr. So
for sure. Again, what he's saying, make sure you look at the schedule, right? Don't just draft your defense because they've got studs. You're going to definitely want to look at the schedule for your defense, and don't take one early. Come on, man. That just annoys me. So,
let's change everything.
Yeah, really. And again, I don't feel like talking about kickers. You good?
So, yeah.
I mean,
even though he's
ridiculous.
pretty good,
Kickers are ridiculous. If you're not taking a kicker as your last pick, then you're doing it wrong anyway. So,
let me just say this: if you want me to talk about the brand, Pat McAfee might boot me in the balls for me to pretend like I know what I'm talking about.
I'll tell you what. To touch on. You know what? We'll save that one for the Bucks. we'll save that for the Bucks. So, let's move on then to the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, not a lot to be said. It feels like the same old Falcons, plus they got my boy. We're going to start at quarterback here with Matt Ryan. Traditionally, you have a good year, you got a bad year, you got a good year, you got a bad year with Matt Ryan. Where do you feel moving into this season? Is he somebody that you're trusting rolling with? Because he tends to be like 8, 9, 10, 11th round, like every year. It doesn't really matter. So what do you think about Matt Ryan? Is he somebody you'd roll with this season?
I think like if all the top quarterbacks were gone and I was ready to take my quarterback and I felt like he was the best one of the litter, I would. He just doesn't excite you. I think we say this every year with him. He's just like a guy that'll get the job done, but it's like, I got Matt Ryan. You're like, yeah, he's my quarterback.
Right.
He's
and
a great
it's all arm. There's no rush yards to put it out there, and you're really dependent on everyone else doing their job.
Exactly. We'll see if the offensive line can take the next step, especially since they invested so many high draft picks into that offensive line. If they can keep him standing upright, he's got, Julio Jones, guys we're going to talk about, another dude I'm really excited about this year. And then we just don't know about like if the Todd Gurley thing, like we're going to get into that. Like,
I mean, we can go ahead and transition because I mean, it's pretty much it's vanilla. It's Matt Ryan. It's vanilla. Unless this is your first year in fantasy, you know what to expect.
For Matt Ryan, you know what to expect. He's probably going to produce for you. He's going to put up numbers. But if like things do crumble around him, he does have a potential to have a bad year. I know, like with Brady and Breeze, and they're playing into older years, but at the end of the day, he is an older quarterback, so he is always suspect to having a decline.
Right, we've gotten spoiled with the Breezes and Brady's, and now we just expect everybody to play till they're 50.
Exactly. So there's always that with Matt Ryan. He's just like, if you draft him, you got a solid quarterback that has the potential to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback, especially. I mean, this offense has tons of potential. Let me say that. It does have tons of potential if everything can gel right, if, Gurley's knee all of a sudden does get magically healed. I mean, it has some potential, but it also has, the opposite where it could crumble and it's a very bad offense.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just move into that knee of Todd Gurley because that's the $1 million question right here. I being a Gurley guy, I think he's healthier than some people are thinking. I don't think it's like a career, this is it thing with him. I think we could still get a productive year from Todd Gurley in this Atlanta offense. Again, I'm curious to see how much of that game flow crap that the Rams gave us with Gurley last year transitions over to the Falcons. But Gurley was still upper echelon in touchdowns. Like it was still a thing. He still got you plenty of fantasy points. So I'm not sure why a lot of people are fading him so much. I don't think he could be a top 2 draft pick for me. I think I'm hoping that he falls to me in the 3rd, 4th round at best. But I mean, I could still see Todd Gurley dropping 1,000 yards rushing, another 400 or 500 receiving. It's not out of the question for me.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see that, man. Like he produces like. When he's healthy, when he's on the field. I was saying this last year, I thought maybe your Rams would do it, like where maybe they give him like an Alvin Kamara type role where it's like, you know what, we're not going to have you be the guy, but we want you to be very productive in your limited amount of snaps. I mean, if he can be healthy, like I said, if that line can gel this year, there's a potential for Todd Gurley to really have a great year, especially when he's got receiving threats in this offense that can help open up running lanes for him. And what's pretty interesting is you want to talk about production. A few weeks ago on my Twitter, I collected stats from the past 3 seasons. And see where players rank to see who's been the highest producers. And one thing I found in the top 10 NFL running backs in total touchdowns since 2017, Todd Gurley was number 1. He had 54. The next closest guy was Christian McCaffrey at 39.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a nose for the end zone, and it's a 1-year deal. He wants to get paid again.
Oh yeah, this is a prove it year, like to himself, not only to like the rest of the league, to fans, like it's to himself too. There's a recipe that he can have an amazing year. I'm not going to reach on him,
right? Exactly.
But if I'm sitting there, maybe the 4th, 5th round, nobody wants to touch him because they're afraid, and I got my RB1 that I'm pretty confident about. Maybe I already drafted my RB2.
Right.
Like,
if Todd Gurley's your RB3, you did
yeah,
great.
Yeah, exactly. So I would not be surprised if I have Gurley on some of my teams. I do think he's definitely a swing. And if we want to get into it, because we have to, if you want his handcuff, I just don't know who to trust, though, between those backup guys. Like, it could be Hill, Allison, or Ito Smith. So just have the understanding, if you do draft Gurley, like, there's not really a for sure handcuff for you to get him later. So you do want to maybe plan ahead, maybe draft another running back in the next couple rounds after him.
Right, or be prudent with your early draft picks and pick guys that don't have injury histories. Don't pair a Todd Gurley with another injury riddled guy. So.
Yeah, like we said, he's a guy. He's a high reward, high risk type of player, but he's a type of player where you're willing to roll the dice on that risk if you're getting him as like your RB3. If you can get him as your flex at RB3, I say go for it.
All day, every day, no question for me. So let's move into the wide receivers, and the man there is obviously Julio Jones, has been for a long time. Calvin Ridley is there as well. Laquan Treadwell, Russell Gage on the roster. It kind of thins out quickly to me after the first 2. Obviously, not a lot needs to be said about Julio. Julio's going to do Julio things again this year, right?
Yeah, it's Julio. Barring some type of injury, he's going to produce for you. Maybe he might find the end zone more this year. I know that's a easy go-to joke. But yeah, Julio's Julio. Pick him where he's going to go. Well, he's probably going in the 2nd round right now. That's usually where he's been stuck the last few years. He's a guy that you'll select and you don't have to think about. As long as he's in your lineup, he's going to produce, and he's a player that rarely has a dud week. He's right, Julio.
His dud weeks are 10. His explosion weeks are 40. It's insane what Julio brings to your team. So the guy I really want to focus on is Calvin Ridley, and do you think he takes the step forward here?
Yeah.
Because he's been in our flex mostly last season, so is now he a guy you can look at and say that's my wide receiver too and be comfortable, or is he still flex level for you?
I know I want as many Ridley shares as I can get. Calvin Ridley was my number 1 wide receiver in that draft class. He's entering his 3rd season. Outside Julio, you can make a case for Hayden Hearst, but there's not a lot of targets to be spread around. For him to be taken away from him. So I think he's going to have a significant role in this offense. And if Matt Ryan has a Matt Ryan type year, I think he's going to go off. Like, I think, all the flashes where we saw him over the last couple of years, those games when he was getting like 2 or 3 touchdowns, I think he's going to be more consistent. I'm not going to say he's going to give you 2 or 3 touchdowns every week, but I think he's going to be a guy that's giving you close to 15 points every week, whether it's between yardage, touchdowns. And I'll be honest too, looking over at going ahead and looking at their defense, you're not going to want to draft their defense. I think their defense is going to struggle this year. So I think this offense is going to be on the field, and they're going to be throwing a lot this year. So I think Calvin Ridley is going to have an amazing year for the Falcons. And spoiler alert, he's probably going to be my number 1 guy on my 3rd year wide receiver article. Year.
I'm with you. Calvin was my guy in that draft. Let me ask you this though: with it being the 3rd, could you see maybe Julio's numbers come down a tick and Calvin's the one that's getting those, or is it just there's like you figure that Matt Ryan's going to be close to 5,000 yards and they got to go to, I mean, a lot of them's going to go to those two.
I could see that happening. Definitely. They maybe want to, start getting Calvin more involved. I know Julio's getting older. They probably want to make sure he's having a role in their offense. They probably want to decide, figure out if Calvin is somebody they're going to want to keep within their scheme. I know they'll have 2 more years with him on his rookie deal after this, but it's that time of the contract where you want to see what you got in the kid. So right. I wouldn't be surprised if he had a significant role. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are weeks he has more targets.
Because I think that's part of the third-year breakout is you want to know if you want to pay him by year 4 so that you can pay him then and save some money. So I think we're definitely going to see a big breakout year from Ridley. And in dynasty leagues, I'm making all kinds of plays to pull him onto my roster. So moving on then to the tight end position, you lose Austin Hooper, you gain a Hayden Hearst. Not really as much opportunity in Baltimore as I would have liked to have seen, but the guy's athletic. He can make all the grabs, has good speed for the position. I kind of like Hayden Hearst because I think he falls in fantasy drafts past all the big names where I'm kind of scooping him up super late. I'd roll with that. What about you, though?
I agree with you on that. Hearst was a tight end I really liked coming in that draft class. I know he kind of gets crapped on because he's an older tight end when he came in, and then Mark Andrews kind of overtook that spot when they drafted him in the same draft as well. But I still think Hearst has the ability. I just think he just didn't find himself in that Ravens offense. He didn't find a significant role in that offense where he was able to feature his talents. And with the loss of Austin Hooper, I mean that opens up tons of targets. Like I said, I definitely think Ridley's going to get most of those targets that opened up, but Hearst is going to get his too. And Matt Ryan had a tendency to look for Hooper when they would get closer to the red zone. So I could see Hearst being like a red zone touchdown machine this year.
A la Ebron, right? A couple years back. So
yeah. He's definitely a guy I think is a sleeper. He's definitely a guy, like if you're going to wait on your tight end, I would definitely you could probably, like you kind of talked about, you're going to be able to scoop him up probably in the later rounds because everybody's going to have a bad taste in their mouth from his time in Baltimore. So you can kind of, weigh the risk of if somebody takes him before you, it's they got him. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You don't have to pull the trigger on him early. But he's a guy that, I would not be surprised if he's in the top 10 for tight ends at the end of the year.
Yeah.
If not top, I won't say top 5, but top 10.
Yeah, top 10 for me as well. And again, I'm that guy who I would rather just wait and wait and wait. I'd rather get a Hayden Hearst super late than, try and reach for a mid-tier tight end. So, again, nothing really much to say here about the defense. This is almost unplayable defense for me. It'd have to be a killer stream for me to ever have the Falcons on my roster.
Yeah, it had to be. They're going against a terrible team.
The third-string quarterback, something like that.
And they would have to prove it in season to me that their defense actually is good. Looking at it on paper. Well, looking at what happened last year, and then you're looking at on paper, it doesn't really tickle my fancy. And then you pull up their week 1 matchup, and it's against the Seahawks. So they will not be getting selected by me in the draft. So they'll be either a mid-season stream because they're going against a terrible quarterback, or their defense does prove me wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm same boat. The odds of them ever playing on my fantasy are slim to none at best. So let's move on into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the big signing of the offseason. Mr. Thomas Brady now in tow at quarterback down there. He's the GOAT. I've fought it enough. He's the GOAT. He's in Tampa now replacing Jameis Winston, and what was it, 42 turnovers or something like that last year? So
something ridiculous.
What an insane number of turnovers from one player, man. But so, that's the big thing here. Let's talk a little bit about what you see fantasy-wise from Tom Brady, because we've already covered the football-wise. You trim down the turnovers, you get wins. But fantasy-wise, what do you expect out of Brady moving forward with his new team?
Well, I definitely expect him to produce. You're an offense that wants to move the ball down the field through the arm of the quarterback. You got you could argue that one of the best duos in the NFL between Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And then you're talking about they got a plethora of tight ends between Gronk, O.J. Howard, and Cameron Brate. And then we'll talk about the running back situation. We'll see how it plays it out, but it really doesn't matter because Brady loves to dump it off to running backs, and Arians loves to scheme that as well. But I mean, it's not like Brady. He's still 2 years off his Super Bowl run. When he last won it with the Patriots. Going back to the stats that I collected over the past, this one was one that surprised me. Over the past 3 seasons, as far as NFL quarterbacks and passing touchdowns, Brady's number 2. Yeah, he is at 85 touchdowns. So that's all you need to, as long as he's getting you touchdowns, that's all you really need. So as far as where he goes, I do feel like because he is Brady, because everybody probably does recognize what we're seeing, like the potential of him in this offense having a good year, he might be going a little too higher than I would like, but I definitely see him producing this year. And then of course, you know what? I'm not even gonna say it up. I was gonna bring up the age thing, but I'm like, you know what? It's Brady. Like, why are we gonna do this 5 years in a row?
Right. We've said the same thing every year. He's old. It doesn't matter for this guy. I'm with you on just about everything you said. I wouldn't 35 touchdowns for me is like kind of baseline for Tom this year. Like, I think that's what I'm gonna get out of him minimum. So, I'm fine with Brady. I don't think I end up with him though, because I'd rather just wait on quarterback because it's so deep. Jack and I covered the quarterbacks by position and ranked them all. There's just so many, man. I can't find myself spending that much fantasy coin on a guy like Tom Brady. But I think if you do, you're going to be fine with the return you get. Just too rich for my blood at this point. I really want to talk about the wide receivers, but they feel so fun that I'd like to save them. So let's talk about the running backs. Rojo didn't do much for you last year. You got with Dare Ogunbowale, whatever, I said that very wrong. And then Keyshawn Vaughn now in tow as well. Vaughn is the one I'm excited about here, but I don't even know how much. Where do you stand on the 3?
See, I just don't know how I feel about him. Ronald Jones, he did show some flashes last year. He just didn't put it all together. Obviously, he needs to improve his receiving ability if he's going to gel well with Brady. That's why they did bring in Keyshawn Vaughn, because Keyshawn Vaughn's a better receiving running back than Jones. Vaughn is a guy I really do like. He's got the body to be a running back. He was if I remember correctly, my running back 10 in this past draft. Went a little higher than I thought, but obviously they saw a role for him within this Bucs offense. As far as if I want to draft one of these two, I don't know if I want either on my team. Just because I could see both of them alternating weeks. Who's having a good week? I know Brady's not playing with Belichick anymore, but I could see a total Brady situation his whole career where you never know which running back to trust that's playing alongside Brady. Each one's going to have their great week. I don't know. I mean, it's time for Ronald Jones to prove himself this year. It is a make-or-break year. He was a second-round pick. He's entering his 3rd year. I want to say that means he should have a year or 2 left on his contract. So if that comes into play, maybe Jones is the guy to lean towards. But see, this is another situation that's affected by the pandemic, right?
Right.
See, I didn't even bring this up. Well, this is kind of our first. I guess this is our first situation we're talking about a rookie that has a potential to have a big role. I don't know if he was
in training camp the whole time. Yeah, maybe Vaughn steals this job before we even get to preseason season.
It from me. I don't know if I want many rookies this year.
Right.
Because if you've been listening to any, I know you have, but if anybody else, you listen to these podcasts and stuff, and they talk about there's I think what Adam Thielen had a quote in an interview yesterday or the other day before where he talked about, he goes, I don't think I would have made it to the NFL if the pandemic was going on during my rookie year.
Right, and because something that's vastly overlooked is the ability to get around the veterans early, right?
Exactly.
This is what it takes sleep-wise. This is what it takes eating-wise. Don't spend all your money. They're not getting those lessons.
Yeah, so that's why I guess if I have to, I would lean, like if I was like just sitting there and both of them were on the board, because once you get to that point in the draft, like most of the starting running backs are taken, and you want to try to get as many potential starters as you can. I mean, I would lean towards Jones just because he has familiarity with the offense. So it's more than likely, because of this whole pandemic situation, he's probably going to get majority of the snaps at the beginning of the year. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Vaughn does pick up the offense quickly, if like halfway through the year he starts getting more touches. So I'll just say this: both players are guys that I'm not confident in if I select them. That they're going to be on my roster at the end of the year.
I don't think I want either one, but if I was forced, I'd rather go Vaughn because at least I'm more excited about him, right? And that's really the only differentiating fact, is that I don't know yet about Vaughn, and I didn't like what I saw out of Rojo. So I'm probably not going either way, though Vaughn excites me slightly more. Let's move into these wide receivers, because this is what everybody wants to talk about anyway, right? You've got Godwin, you've got Edwards, some other guys on the roster, but it doesn't matter because they've got 3 tight ends we'll be covering here in a minute. So it's those two. That's just like plucking hairs to me as to which one I want. I don't even know which one I'd rather have. I know I want one of them. Who would you rather have at this point?
Ooh, it's hard to pass up on my boy Mike because he's one of my favorite players in the NFL. So I would honestly lean toward. Yeah, he's consistent and big target for Brady in the red zone. He can go deep. But I also lean towards Godwin because Godwin will work in the slot. We already know Brady loves slot receivers. He'll be working a lot of those under routes as well, the slant routes, stuff like that. I think they both get their dues. I don't think you can go wrong with whoever you would select. Both are great players, and both should have great years playing with Brady. Now, if something were to happen, you'd want to, yeah. I mean, Tyler Johnson's a good guy out of Minnesota. That's one of the guys I would keep my eye on throughout the season. But other than that, you want one of those 2 wide receivers from the Bucs. I wouldn't literally look past those 2 just because of how many tight ends they have.
Right. There's going to be so many targets soaked up at that tight end position. I think between the 2, I want to lean Evans. You can't go wrong either way, but it feels like to me that Evans feels more guaranteed to get more touchdowns by the end of the year. So again, it's like razor thin between the 2. I don't know that you can go wrong with either one, though. So both Godwin and Evans, super high on my list. Now let's talk about the tight ends, because again, this is legitimately 3 pretty good tight ends deep, even though we don't know where Gronk stands. He's still one of the greatest to ever play. You've got him, you've got OJ, you've got Cameron. Break it down for me, man. What do you do with this position, Cody?
I don't take any of them, to be honest, just because there's 3 of them. I don't trust that situation. Maybe somebody does get traded out of the 3, not Gronk, but O.J. Howard or Cameron Brate, and that can open up things. But if they enter the season with all 3, I don't want any of them, because you already know Gronk is going to go higher than where he probably should. And he might end up coming back and being Gronk, right, and produce for you. But I also could see him having just like limited production in a good way, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's going to help out the Bucs win games, but maybe he doesn't help you out consistently in fantasy, which is why I probably don't want to take him where he's going. O.J. Howard, I'm very surprised they're holding on to him, but they gave him the 5th-year option. Obviously, they want to see if he can develop. I could definitely see it all of a sudden with, Brady comes into play. All of a sudden, he's taking that next step as a player. Brate's a guy where, like, if something were to happen to Gronk, something were to happen to O.J., and it's Brate, like, I feel like Brate would go off with Brady. He seems like the reason why I say that because he seems like a Brady tight end. If anybody remembers, people thought maybe the Pats could trade for Brate when they still had Brady, when O.J. Howard was supposed to be the guy last year. So he seems like a guy to have if something were to happen to the other tight ends. Other than that, there's just too many guys for this ball to be spread around. Once you got to consider Mike Evans and Godwin. So I don't know if I want either of these tight ends. They're all great. I don't want to like make it sound like they're all bad. Oh, we can debate about O.J. Howard, but
I think the addition of Gronkowski is going to do wonders for Howard. I think he might. It's to me, it's one of those things like maybe he's missing something, just something he needs to see, and it'll click, right? Because he's an athletic freak. But I'm with you. I'm not touching these guys. What I think is going to happen is Gronk is going to come out and have a couple of monster weeks early on in the season. So if he does happen to fall in a draft for some reason, I may pick him with the full intent of trading him by like week 2 or 3, right? I'm kind of on that pandemic mode. Like maybe he's there because it's a smooth transition. Tom has his guy to go to early on. When he gets more comfortable, those targets kind of spread out. So again, that might be something I look to do is draft Gronk for trade value. But that's a dangerous game you're playing right there. So I'm kind of with you that I don't think I'm going to take any of these guys out of that backfield. What a great problem to have for Tampa Bay in real life and a crap one for fantasy purposes. So let me see here. What do we got now? Let's move on down to the defense here. Took a big step forward the last half of last year. You still got Sue, Vita Vea's there. JPP, Devin White, Levante David, they got the names, right? What do you think about this team as far as fantasy relevancy is concerned?
Well, I mean, it's definitely a defense that you could probably want to get this year. They have one of the best front sevens in the league. And it's just all in their secondary. Their secondary is very young still, but they're all kind of getting to their like third, fourth seasons. So you want to hope they all take that next step as a player. That's the only thing I could see their defense holding them back, but they're definitely a defense I definitely wouldn't mind streaming. They had the number one rushing defense last year. So and I think their front seven can get after the quarterback, get those sacks. And then one of my favorite players in the draft, Antoine Winfield Jr., is a ball hawk, and that's what that secondary needed. And if he can translate over to the NFL right away and produce those turnovers, this could be a defense you want to have throughout the year. Now, their week 1 matchup is about the team we're going to talk about next, the Saints. So I don't know if I want to roll them out there week 1. But they feel like they might be one of those high floor type of defenses that you could play throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on that one too. Super high end stream if they are available. If not, maybe hold on to them for a few weeks, play that game with them. But I like what they've got moving forward. I just need to see if we can get the next step forward from guys like Dean Davis, Murphy, Bunting, all the secondary. Exactly what you said. So. Obviously not covering kickers here, so we'll move on to the last team in the division, the New Orleans Saints. And, Drew Brees is back. Taysom Hill ended up staying, of course. Still not sure what's happening with him. And then they add old blind Jameis Winston into the mix here. But obviously this is still Drew's team, right? You may have a concern with mitigating play time. How much of a concern is that for you with Drew?
Well, I don't know. Drew's going to have games probably this year, but he's not going to be a guy I want to have because I think his numbers will be inconsistent, especially if he is truly open to letting Taysom Hill getting snaps throughout the year. But I also think he's comfortable with that because I think he also understands his arm is not really there anymore for a full 16 games. Yeah, 16 game. We're still in 16 games. We're not at the 17th game yet. But yeah, full 16-game schedule. And I think he wants to save his arm as much as he can for the postseason. Brees, he's going to have those weeks. He puts up a great week, but I just think he's going to be very inconsistent this year. And then there's always the suspect that it's been like the last 2 or 3 years, he's dealt with some type of injury as well, too. So he is showing his age now. So with that being said, yeah, I definitely could see Brees winning guys some weeks, but then I could see him having a down week the next week, whether it's because he just had a bad game or just because Taysom Hill took over some snaps.
Yeah, for sure. Again, it's not the same old Drew Brees, right? It's used to be able to just stick him in and forget about it, right? Set it and forget it quarterback. I think those days are done. You're definitely going to see a lot of packages with Taysom Hill. Before we move on to another position, though, let me ask you, should something happen to Drew Brees, is Jameis Winston worth an ad for you?
I mean, he's definitely
Or is it like a
interesting.
stream-worthy thing at that point?
At that point, it's just going to be debated, though.
Right. I
Like,
mean, he threw
you
for
know,
5,000
well,
yards last year. It's not like he
well,
couldn't
yeah,
get it
well,
done.
yeah, exactly. And then like he actually, well, besides when he bombed in the championship week, he helped lead people to championships last year. But then this is where I get confused with the Jameis signing. Is like Sean Payton wants to say Taysom Hill's the next guy. They keep on saying that, so like you would think. At that point, it's like, well, why don't you just play Taysom Hill? But then it's like, oh, you did sign Jameis and you played Teddy last year. So, I mean, if Breeze does go down, I would definitely go ahead and add Jameis and see what happens. But I just don't know if I would play him that first week. Because, I mean, you remember last year, all of us were like, yeah, Taysom Hill's going to be the guy when Breeze is out. And then next, Teddy starts like the next 5 or 6 games. So,
Right. Right. So
it's a situation you'd have to see develop when it happens. It's kind of hard to speculate what they would do.
for sure, for sure. I think I would roll Winston, man, because just again, I think what the problem is Taysom Hill has his packages cut out, and they didn't want to take away from those. So I think they're always going to go with that third guy behind Taysom because of the offensive packages put in for him. So if something does happen to Drew, I'd probably blow a buttload of fab on Jameis Winston if we're being honest with ourselves here. So I want to move down into the running back position here, and kind of a down season for Alvin Kamara last year. What was it, first round pick last year, going second and third in early round drafts this year. I've seen him go in the fourth, which is egregious to me. Latavius Murray still on the roster. They do also have Ty Montgomery. What do you think about old AK going into this year? If I can get him in the third or fourth, I'm laughing at everybody around me.
Yeah, all day, especially if you can get him in the third or fourth. You're talking about a guy that was debated if he should be the number one player in last year's drafts. And then I believe I want to say his contract's coming up after this year. So he's trying to earn himself a payday. So he's going to want to stay healthy. Only really reason why he had a down year last year is because he did get banged up. But obviously that could leave people with a bad taste in their mouth. Shoot, I'm one of those guys that ended up picking him at like third or fourth last year at the slot. But when you're talking about getting a player like him, and if he falls to the third or fourth round, at that point you're getting him as an RB2. And then if he can get back to himself the way we saw him when he entered the league, you're getting a big steal. So Alvin Kamara is still a guy I really like. And barring any type of like lingering injury or anything that pops up, he should be able to go back to being the player he was beforehand. And then obviously, if you want to be safe, Latavius Murray is a great handcuff, and he will produce for you if anything were to happen to Kamara.
Do you think in a pinch that you'd be comfortable rolling Lat Murray in the flex even if Kamara's not hurt this year? Because I mean, Latavius Murray way overproduced what people thought he was going to do last season. When Ingram left, I remember everyone was all severe drop off between him and Murray, and it was a drop off, but it wasn't near as severe as everyone said.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of playing like a backup running back in the flex, but if you were in a pinch, I could see it, definitely. As long as I wouldn't do it week 1, but if like it's week 2, week 3, and the first 2 or 3 games, I see the Lat Murray with a healthy Kamara does have a role within that offense, and yeah, I'd feel comfortable doing that.
And I only ask that because to me it feels like Lat Murray is one of those guys that is a handcuff, but is also useful in his own right. So he's a guy I kind of target super late in drafts.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those premier handcuffs to have.
Absolutely. Now let's move into the wide receiver position. Mr. Michael Thomas been on Twitter beefing with Devontae Parker. You add Emmanuel Sanders here. You've got Traquan Smith, Deontay Harris, Lil Jordan Humphrey, which is just fun to say. What do you think about the receiving core in general? Obviously, can't guard Mike's going to get his. So,
yeah, I mean Michael Thomas, he has his role in the offense. I don't see that
like 150 targets, and that's
Yeah, exactly. So I don't see that really changing, and I think the addition of Emmanuel Sanders even is better, and that's going to open up for him because they needed that type of. He's not as fast as he used to be back in the day, but he's a guy that can still go off and still take catches and help stretch the field. And he's his play of Emmanuel Sanders playing how he plays the game is a perfect complement to how Michael Thomas plays the game. And I think they're both going to help benefit each other. I mean, when the 49ers and the Saints got in that matchup last year, that shootout that the 49ers snuck away with, Sanders had 7 catches, 157 yards, and a touchdown. He even threw a touchdown in that game. So I think that's actually what led to their signing, because they saw what he could do in the dome. So Michael Thomas, he's rightfully so going to go in the first round. I probably won't take him. Not a big fan of taking wide receivers in the first round, but he's definitely well worth it. He's going to get his catches. He's a PPR machine. But when you talk about Emmanuel Sanders, I don't know why, but I really like this move. We'll see where his ADP is by the time real drafts go on, because obviously ADPs from now till then are going to change so much, like they all
super
do.
Fluctuation.
Yeah. Once we get closer to the season, you'll see where the real ADP is right now when the casual fans start getting involved. But yeah, I think he's a guy like Emmanuel Sanders as like a wide receiver 3 or 4 or 5. Like, I think that's going to be a steal for somebody this year.
Couldn't agree more. I love the fact this is a perfect landing spot for him. Obviously, everything you said about Michael Thomas is true. The man's going to get targeted. It just doesn't matter. So if you are in a full PPR league and you just want something safe towards the back end of the first round, Michael Thomas is probably the safest it gets.
I will say, I mean, I could definitely see myself taking. I might have misspoke when I said I want to take him, but there is a scenario depending on where you are in the first round. I could see myself taking him, because there's some of these running backs go in the first round are just as much iffy. He might be safer than some of these running backs as well.
For sure, I do tend to go running back in early, but again, if all my guys are off the board, I've got no problem pulling the trigger on Michael Thomas.
Right. Like, I might consider Michael Thomas over a guy like Derrick Henry that's going in the first round.
I would definitely take Michael Thomas over Derrick Henry. We'll explore that more when we get to that division, but I have a theory on Mr. Thomas this year, so or Henry this year. So let's move into the tight end position, because again, you've got Jared Cook is there, Josh Hill's there, and then, if I'm not mistaken, one of Roy's boys, Adam Trautman, from the draft this season. Where do you stand with the position here? Again, the rookie running backs don't tend to translate anyway, so Trautman was just a shout out to Roy, but more so Jared Cook. Is he a threat in this offense?
Definitely. I mean, we saw him have great weeks last year. I just think he's a tight end that will produce for you some weeks. You would definitely want to play the matchup with him, but he had some weeks where he kind of would disappear. But that does happen when you have like a Michael Thomas, and now you're adding Emmanuel Sanders.
Right, that's what really scares me, is that you could throw Jared Cook in, because he was getting anywhere from 5 to 10 targets a game. Now, are those now going to Sanders, and does that scare you away from Cook?
Yeah, it definitely does. I think there's a number of tight ends I would have rather than Cook. I think Cook's a tight end to me, as much as like I like his situation where he is and that he can produce. I'm not trying to leave the draft with him. If I find him on the waivers because I need a tight end into the season, that's how I'd probably prefer to get Cook. If something does happen to him, I would like to see what happens with Trautman. Trautman can be a pretty good wide receiving tight end, but like you said, rookie tight ends really don't produce much in their first year. So yeah, Cook for me is a guy, like, I could definitely see him having some great games, but I could see him having games where he only had like 2 catches for 20 yards.
Or just nothing, just donuts. Yeah, like he just donuts, and you're pulling your hair out. So, Jared Cook is one of those guys. He's going to give me a heart attack before it's time. So, moving into the defense, this is one I'm not super I end up using them a couple times, but I don't want to draft this defense. They're not dominant to me. So I may be wrong. I'm going to turn it over to you, but this feels like a stream defense for me.
I don't know if they're, I see what you're saying, but they are one of the deepest defenses overall.
I just don't see a lot of point. Like, the thing is like 1 week they'll score a bunch. Like a guy like Janoris for me is the focal instrument here. Like, it's 1 week I'll grab 2 pick sixes, and then I'm going to give up 10 touchdowns the next week. Like, it's just it's
I
not
would
a team I'm banking on.
Janoris Jenkins, the prior defense, but you're talking like Malcolm Jenkins, Marshawn Lattimore, Cameron Jordan. They're getting a healthy Marcus Davenport back. They got the DNs to get the sack potential.
Yeah, they got
added
4
Zach
games
Bond,
against the Bucks and Falcons too. Like, I think that's
Yeah.
it. That's the issue
Yeah.
for me is that I have to look at that division.
Get that? No, I definitely. You already know. Like, they're definitely a defense. Like, I'm not trying to say they're an all-world defense. I'm just saying like they're one of the high floor defenses, similar to the Bucks. But like we always say, it's always about streaming matchups. They have the Bucks week 1, so I definitely won't draft them to be on my week 1 defense. But they're a defense where, like, even if they have or they're going against an average to above average offense and there's no other better options, I probably would pick them because they have good overall defense.
Right. I just don't look at them and say like the Bears a couple years back or Baltimore throughout history where they're going to just put up points. Like, they're going to be a good defense, but is it going to point? But again, somebody's going to overdraft them anyway. So for me, I never end up with like a top 5-10 defense anyway. So, because I'm always just like, I learned from you a few years back. I just stream everything, so screw it. But did I miss anybody on this roster here? I don't think that I did. I think I covered everybody.
We went over, because none of the backups are really relevant. If any of them get hurt, you're going to have to see it play out as far as like wide receivers. So
right, they've only got 100 on the fucking roster right now too. So.
Right, yeah, exactly. Well, we got to see who even makes the team outside Thomas and Sanders, but yeah, I think you hit them all.
Awesome. Well, let me ask you this: we did this last year. Go back and we'll the MVP for each team that we discussed. Yeah. Obviously, in Carolina, we know who that is. That's CMC, no questions asked, right?
Yeah, CMC MVP of the Panthers.
Atlanta Falcons is an interesting one. It's been Julio for so long. I think when you factor in draft value, what you said about Ridley, I'm all on the Ridley train. I think this could end up being Calvin Ridley when you factor in draft value.
Yeah, I definitely. That's why I said ooh when you asked that, because I'm like, dang, I could see Ridley having a. There's potential Ridley maybe outproduces Jones this year. But out of respect for Jones's overall career and the fact that he's got a higher floor than Ridley, I will say that Ridley does offer a low floor if he doesn't take that next step, or if that Falcons offense does crumble around them. But yeah, I'm gonna pick Julio just out of respect for the MVP.
I can roll with that. Falcons. Like I said, it's Julio Jones. He gets his no matter what. So. Tampa Bay, probably the hardest one for me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to lean Mike Evans for all the reasons I said earlier, but...
Yeah, same thing. I'm going to roll with Mike, just because I think he just has a better, consistent, long overall career. Not saying Godwin won't, but I feel like he's probably the safer play between the two. I'm splitting hairs saying that, but
absolutely, it's a matter of taste between these two. That's simply all it is. Like you could say Godwin, and I'd be fine with but I lean Mike Evans by just ever so much. And
and I saw he's got a Bucks tattoo on his chest, so he's Bucks for life. So I'll pick him.
Absolutely, we're gonna go ahead and give that then to Mike Evans, and then the New Orleans Saints is Michael Thomas or Alvin Kamara for me. I think in order for them to be at their best, I think it behooves them to have Kamara be the MVP, but Michael just gets targeted so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's you took the words out of my mouth. Like Kamara should be the guy, but Thomas is more consistent. You got to go with him because he offers a higher floor. So I'll go with Thomas, but I agree, Kamara should be the MVP of that team. If Kamara's, let me say this: if Kamara is the MVP of that team, they have the chance to do their run and go to the Super Bowl. If he's not the MVP team, they're going to be like last year, where maybe they're good, they can get into the playoffs, but maybe they don't go all the way.
Exactly, well said. It's in real football, they need Kamara to be the MVP. So, and then out of all four, I lean CMC, no brainer, MVP of this whole division. CMC, it's not even close. The guy's just a monster.
Yeah, you're not going to hear an argument from me about one of my players. So.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for the NFC South here. Are we going to bounce back to the AFC South next, I would assume?
Yeah, we'll do it like last year. So to kind of give everybody a preview, we did the NFC fantasy relevant, our NFC South fantasy relevant players this week. We'll do AFC South next week. Then I think we'll go East, North, and West. Kind of. Please go check out our Twitter. Kind of like how we're doing our Twitter polls right now for all of our fans to vote on. As far as depending on the topic, right now our current topic everybody's voting on is the best running back by division. Then we'll go all the way to the NFL as a whole in the NFL. Little propping up for our Twitter there, but yeah, similar to that.
All right. Well, then we'll make sure that you guys pay attention to our Twitter vote and all these polls. Cody, I want to thank you again, man. It's nice to get this going up again. So, it's been
yeah.
months.
I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. Honestly, I'll go ahead and we were probably going to talk about it after we recorded, but I felt like we were right back to normal. Like I felt like we didn't take a step off. A little bit of rust at the beginning, getting the flow, but once we got that flow down, we got through this thing, and I expect some better episodes over the summer, so look out for them.
Absolutely. Why don't you go ahead, say your goodbyes, where they can follow you, and all that fun
jazz. Again, thank you guys for everybody that tuned in to this episode. My Twitter handle is @CodyTalksNFL. If you disagree with any of my takes, if you have any questions, fantasy football or football-wise, feel free to message me, DM me. Other than that, glad to be back talking fantasy football with you, man.
Always glad to talk a little fantasy football with Cody Talks NFL, man. I feel like I've got a cheat code because you're my buddy. So, as always, you can follow me on Twitter @RobRobGraphics. Same thing Cody said. You got any beef with what I said? Always looking to have a conversation about it. So, we ask that you like and subscribe on YouTube and across any of the podcast platforms that you do listen on. We want to thank you guys for tuning in to this, the first of many episodes of the 2020 season for the Fantasy Football Hot Seat. We do thank you for listening. This has been presented by Blitzalytics.com, and we look forward to talking to you next week. Yeah.